President Carter came to office in the wake of Watergate and Vietnam with a commitment to right the ship of state.
President Carter brought back to government honesty, integrity, and faith in government. He ran as a candidate on a government as good as its people, and he truly did deliver that.
I think President Carter in many ways was ahead of his time in terms of his emphasis, for example, on human rights, in terms of his thinking about alternative energy, in terms of his role in the Middle East peace agreements that he put together. And we all know that his ex-presidency, which has been such a long one, has been graced by remarkable contributions to humanity by former President Carter. I think right now, he is seen very favorably. I'm really happy to see that because he's a very special man.
One of President Carter's biggest challenges was energy.
Wow, that is nice. I think that guy is his autobiographer. Excuse me, I'm not sure, but man, I remember I was in the 6th grade when Jimmy Carter was president, and it was it was a class project, and we all had to write letters to the White House. And being a black school, a predominantly black school, we were basically writing letters to the White House asking for Martin Luther King's holiday to be made a national holiday because it wasn't yet. And so we was writing letters, and I remember Jimmy Carter to my house responded. We got a letter in the mail from the White House, and my parents was like, "What?" I was like, "Man," I was so surprised. But and it was a generic response. But the fact that he responded and his presidential letterhead and his signature in gold, and I was like, wow. And I still have that response from the White House. But it made me to think that the highest person in the land, the president of the United States, actually responded to me, and I saw his name and my name on the same envelope. It just inspired me to know more and to start paying attention. And I started paying attention immediately. And other than asking a lot of, people who I was around, uncles, aunts, and teachers, and some people, I would question adults a lot, sometimes probably to the point of annoyance. But I was inquisitive, and I wanted to know about politics, but I was asking the wrong people, I realize now, because black people were being misled and brainwashed and like now voting in such high percentages in one direction, and it's not benefiting them. We were doing that. And when we had Jimmy Carter in, I was like really not old enough to vote or no shit like that, but like felt like I was supportive of him. And when he ran against Reagan and lost, I was going to my teachers and staying a little bit after class and asking them questions. And they was like, probably thought something was wrong with me. But I was like, are you going to vote for him? And they was like, who? I'm like, for Jimmy Carter. And it was like, because everywhere I went, teachers was like, I'm voting for Jimmy Carter. I was having conversations with adults, maybe my parents, friends, and all of that. And when he lost, I really thought everybody had lied to me, because every adult that I talked to, was my first introduction to like, whoa, that wasn't the majority of the adults in the world. That was the majority of the adults in my world. And for him to have lost by a landslide, that messed me up for a minute, but it opened my eyes that I was in such a small pond, a small black child in Compton, just talking to black postal workers and teachers and my parents' friends and my aunts and uncles. My perception was like way off. But once I began to recalibrate it and understand that the world was a lot bigger than that, but still, I had a lot of growth to do, but it did make me understand, out of all the adults I knew, the young ones and the old ones, they were all voting for Jimmy Carter. And then he lost terribly, and I was like, whoo.
In the face of the second Arab oil embargo.
Well, he was president during a very challenging time. As you recall, there was the oil embargo, which drove oil prices up dramatically. That became a catalyst for the highest inflation that we had had really since the war, and probably even before that. And so he had to take some very tough fiscal measures. He did appoint Paul Volcker, who, by very much tightening monetary policy, caused a recession, which certainly was not an easy thing for President Carter to run through.
He was the first person to talk about energy and how we had to start looking at renewable energy plans and how our country could invest and incentivize in that area. And I don't know if you remember, but he had a solar panel on the White House.
I remember it clearly. And I thought that that was like, it was a house in Compton that had solar panels on it. And I used to drive by it and see this house, and no one else had them. And I was like, what are those? And my father was like, I think they're some kind of solar. I was like, solar panels? And I was like, what do they do? You know, and then when he explained generally, you know, the electrical benefit of them, I was like, damn. And then I remember about the Jimmy Carter later. I was like, wow, on the White House? It just sounded kind of unheard of, right? And he had him on the White House. And I think it was 1978 he put him up there. But I'm thinking, damn. Well, to think that Ronald Reagan came along behind him and took them down, that's regressive. That's the kind of country that we live in. That to me, I just remember the 80s of it's just like living life in reverse, because Ronald Reagan, in my personal opinion, was one of the worst. I'll speak about him a lot in a negative sense, because I think he was one of the worst presidents for black people. You know, that in my memory. And so I never thought he was a good president. When I hear black people like Obama praise him, I begin to question them. And that's how I started having an issue with Obama in the first place. That's cool with him, but he black, or he'd be around black people, or whatever he is. So I was cool with it. I wasn't tripping. But he crossed the line when he started talking too positively about, see, that's the problem with the Democrats and me. He started speaking too positively about Reagan. And like that shit. So I started looking into Obama a little more, and that's when I started to part from him as being any kind of support back in, you know, during his first administration. But Jimmy Carter was a progressive, true progressive, a true forward-thinking type president. For that time, and for him to be from Georgia, and for me being the little history book militant in my own mind type, writing poetry about slavery and shit, I actually admired him. And I was surprised at myself in a few instances at the level of admiration that I have for Jimmy Carter. I think Jimmy Carter was a cool president, and for the time, and you got to take that into account as well. At the time, I wasn't considering that, but I look back and I still feel fondness for his presidency. I thought he was a good president, and I thought he's a good man too. After he got out the presidency, when he could barely walk and needed help walking, he was starting to look kind of like Biden, and he's out there building houses. That's what Biden should have done. His legacy could have been something like Jimmy Carter's as a humanitarian, maybe in the hood where all the people who you locked up and ruined their lives. Would have been a way to try to restore your legacy. Restore. That's like making America great again. You know, some things you just can't say. It's a wonderful thing to understand that we live in a great country. Just great just by the impact that we have on the world. But when you look at it great in some other areas, it's kind of hard to say that with a straight face and be respectful to others that you share the country with. But man, Jimmy Carter, that was my dude right there. I really liked him. I remember being such of a weirdo when it came to politics, because I really understood politics better than most kids, but I didn't understand politics as I understood what the adults had taught me real quick. It didn't take me long to be understandable or become very understandable about how Democrats rolled. And that's why when I became an adult and joined a union. It just went hand in hand. I was in there until you get to a point where you realize that you're running on that little hamster wheel. And then when you realize that your unions and your Democratic Party is talking more about immigrant rights and LGBT rights than they are about black rights, I started to part from them ways. Nothing wrong with it. Some people might feel different than I do, and I totally support them in the way they go. But Jimmy Carter, man, I'm telling you, y'all, a president like him to have been a two-termer could have changed the trajectory of the nation. It could have put us in a different path than what we're on. Because Reagan, maybe as old as he was, because I think when he ran in 1981 and won, he took over and was sworn in at like 78 years old. I think that's what it was. I don't want to say 71. He went out, I'm thinking of goddamn Biden, my bad. He was 71. And when he swore in at 71, he was the oldest president that we'd ever had. Because he was like 78, 79 when he got out of his second term. And they hid him when he was doing what Biden is doing. They hid him well. And maybe he wasn't as advanced either in his mental decline. But Reagan, if we could have blocked him from winning, and there were some events going on in the world with the Iran hostage crisis and the energy crisis and the inflation like we'd never seen, some of us. And it was the undoing of him ever thinking he's going to be president. Reagan was, yeah. And he had a lot of black people who were supporting him. It's kind of a crazy time. But the black people I knew wouldn't, or they say they wouldn't.
Which when he left, President Reagan took down. But he had fuel mileage standards and, really realized, I think, way before anybody else that we had to start.
Yeah, I heard about that, right? Fuel mileage standards. That was Jimmy Carter in his presidency. How many miles per gallon and they had to meet these standards. Instead of just putting gas guzzlers on the road and not looking back and just pouring a bunch of gas and not thinking about the environment. Solar panels, MPG standards, that's the kind of shit that a president back then in the late 70s is thinking about. And when Ronald Reagan came in, he was trying to put the country on the path that Donald Trump is trying to do, but it's a fairy tale at this point. You can't keep integrating all these different people from all over the world into this country, into this soup, and thinking that the soup is going to continue to taste the same. It isn't. So that train has left the station. But where we are going and what Trump's trying to do, there is going to be a collision. And I just hope it's something that it just be another flavor of the country and we can all meld together and work through this, because Donald Trump is a very old man. So his ideas and his beliefs and the things that he reacts to are a little different than us. So we have to accept that and hope that he just do the best he can do within the limits of the law. And then we can hopefully make some progress, but move on without him once he steps down and see what we got to offer next, and see if we can have that one election where the independents really do win or really do come close and make it, because we need that third party. We need a party that the black people can belong to, and it cannot be named the Democratic Party. And I don't think that most black people are mindset with the Republicans, the brainwashing is deep. I don't think that there will be an opportunity for any mass amount of black people to go vote for the Republicans unless there is a transformation. Some president, and I guess if a president can end an executive action, i.e. the 40 acres and a mule, then a president can enact a new 40 acres and a mule. So hell, who knows? Trump, oh, he might not give a damn. He might try to, give them no on the way out the door and do a executive order giving black people something that no other president ever has, which would be anything. So, hey, just wishful thinking.
Thinking about what climate and what it was doing to our planet.
But as influential as Jimmy Carter was as president, he will be remembered every bit as much for what he did after he left office.
The thing, though, that I think is absolutely most notable about President Carter is we can all debate the relative merits of any individual president's term, but I think it's inarguable that President Carter is the single most impressive, most successful, and most to be admired ex-president in the history of our nation. This is a
Wow, that's a deep statement, and I agree. Because I think back to our presidents that we've had, and he just seemed, man, he one of them presidents who you just feel by his, demeanor and presence on TV that he just was a good dude. He appeared to be. And good old Southern gentleman and all. In the context of the United States, he just seemed like someone who should be admired and understood and respected and learned about. That's the problem with most of our public figures. The name Jimmy Carter might ring a bell, but that's all most people know is his name and that he was the president. He had a very interesting life and a very productive life, and I think he, by being a one-term president and not just going and sitting in the corner or building his presidential library and fading away, he got involved in civil rights. He got involved in the homeless and helping build houses for underprivileged people and low-income people. I swear that's where Biden needs to be. Not now. Right now, I wouldn't trust Biden with a nail gun or any power tools. But back when he was still, he would have been great for that kind of stuff. Biden's a good bullshitter. He comes off as a really good person, a genuine person. But when you hear him talking with the mics off, he comes across as a very shit-talking kind of person. I don't like that shit because when the cameras are rolling, he really is charismatic. Everybody is looking at how can this dude with his diminished mind. I just don't believe it. Sometimes I just think of Biden and he's like the exact opposite of what I look at Jimmy Carter as. And that's why I feel so strongly about how I feel about Biden. Because I feel strongly about how I feel about Carter. I thought Carter was a cool-ass president. And when I used to see him standing around Obama and Bush, and when they were all, still like, even Big Bush, Little Bush, Obama, they'd all be together and shit. I didn't like Jimmy Carter being around them. I think he's really a good dude. And being a president of the United States has some requirements, and definitely the two-termers. If you're a one-term president, usually it's because you got near and you fucked up somebody's trust for you. And it's probably somebody who's influential enough to make sure you don't get reelected. It don't mean you was a bad president. It just means you wasn't really rolling with them the way they need you to roll with them. And I think that's what happened with Jimmy Carter. He just... and I don't think he's a hard-nosed person or God damn it, this is the way it is. I don't believe he's that kind of person. I just believe he stood on what he stood on, and they stood on what they stood on, and, he had to move his shit out the White House.
Man who took the responsibilities of being a visible public figure incredibly seriously and was a role model to all of us.
Damn, 100 years old. That's crazy. And since we're talking about 100 years old, and that's quite a life right there. But my grandfather lived from 1865 to 1965, so that's 100 years. So we got that kind of longevity in us too. Jimmy Carter, that's a sad one. I really hate to see that one there, guys. At 100 years old, it ain't you understand the reality of things, but he's just a good soul, and hopefully, we can see him in the next life and vote for him again or something, and not vote for Reagan this time. I don't know how that happened, man, but it really speaks to the country, though. It makes you have a better understanding of the United States when you hear about people who you think is a bad guy, and from what I was being told, and then a good guy, and then the good guy loses, and then you think, well, what makes it happen like that? And then it doesn't mean the country's bad. It doesn't mean the people that voted for that guy are bad. It doesn't mean that guy is really bad, but the word is different, and that's what we should be saying and teaching our children, how different people are. It doesn't mean they're wrong, and it don't mean they're right, but it do mean they're different, and sometimes the difference in them is something that you might not like, but they're different, and you are different too. And I think that's where we get all mixed up over here. But Jimmy Carter, speaking of different, as presidents go, he was different. And rest in peace, Jimmy Carter. And thank you, everybody, for joining in to go through my favorite presidents saga. I'm very a little choked up over it, only because as a small child, I really used to talk about him a lot and ask a lot of questions about him. So I have a lot of knowledge about him and information about his life. And I think it's a wonderful life. I think he was a president who kind of stood on his own, 10 toes down and all in a presidential manner, and it will get you one term. You gotta play ball with him. So, folks, with that one, like, comment, please subscribe and share, and we'll see you on the next one.